And this is really what I support women to come back to, is the sacredness and also the innocence of our pleasure. And we learn very quickly what is pleasurable and what isn't. That's how we learn to navigate the world. I'm a pleasure coach now because I know what it's like to have that innocence of pleasure in life, and also what it feels like to completely lose it. In my first marriage, we stopped having any sexual intimacy at all for the last few years, which was really, really a big challenge that has also led me to where I am, where I completely shut down my sexuality, my desires, my wishes, made myself so small, unexpressed. For the first few months, he didn't tell me that he had made this decision, that we just weren't going to have sex anymore. So for those 3 months, I sat with so much rejection at night, wondering what was wrong with me, what had happened in our relationship. Was I not sexy enough, beautiful enough, smart enough, radiant enough, spiritual enough? You know, it really hit on my core not enough wound. I wish for every woman to know the power of our vulvas. It is incredible what we can create from here.
Welcome to the Enlightened DXB podcast. I'm your host, Erica Masako-Welch, and I'm so excited to start 2025 with none other than my sister, Alice Hong. She is an embodied feminine leadership coach, and we will unpack that in a moment. But welcome, Alice.
Thank you so much, Erica. What a joy, delight, pleasure, honor to be here.
So excited to have you here. And it's been so beautiful to just share space with you. As two working women, you know, you coming into my space, but it's been so easeful and just so beautiful. So I'm really excited to dive in today.
Easeful, joyful, rich, deep, right away. That's what I've always loved about our friendship.
All the things that, I really, am grateful to sisterhood for. These are the best parts of sisterhood. And I salute you, dear sister.
I absolutely feel the same way. Thank you for seeing possibility in the ways that I hadn't yet seen, and extending your heart and your home and this beautiful city to me.
Yeah, see, I'm recruiting everyone to Dubai, always.
She's doing an excellent job over here right now with me.
So the first time I met Alice, this beautiful woman in front of me, I also, I often have these, I guess they're kind of epiphanies in the moment and intuitions. And I met you, and I think I remember buying some earrings from you. They were like feather earrings at a Tantra festival in Turkey, of all places. And I don't think I knew that you were also a Canadian by that point, but Canadian-Asian connection already.
Yes.
There was something about your energy and the way that you spoke, and just this beautiful transmissions that you had, but just the energy that you carried. And I was that girl that walked up to you and was buying earrings from you. And I was like, I don't know what I said, but it must have been something like, I really dig you. And I think, do you remember this?
Well, I definitely remember the moment. I 100% remember the moment that we met the first time. And I remember 100% feeling like I'm going to know this woman. She's going to be a friend of my life.
Yeah. I love that when
Yeah,
that happens.
I didn't remember the I dig you, but now that you say it, it's very familiar.
And what I remember, and I don't know, sometimes we fill in our memories, right? But I was like, Alice, I really dig you. And you looked me straight in the eye, and you could have responded a million things, and you looked at me and you're like, I really dig you too. And you said that with your whole soul, and I was like I don't know. When you have these girl crushes and then they're like, I dig you too. And I was just like, ah.
And here we are.
And then here we are in Dubai, 4 years later. There's been a Burning Man together since. We've gone to Prague together.
Yeah.
I visited you in Switzerland.
Yes.
And it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, a beautiful one.
Yeah. And I'm so excited to have you here because probably even before I started this podcast, I think I seeded it with you.
Yeah, I believe so too, because I remember, I don't remember where it was, but I remember the moment where you're like, I want to do this because you had told me you wanted to bring together the people that you loved and have these conversations in depth that you are able to cultivate and curate in your life, and to be able to bring this insight, wisdom, heart, soul to more people.
Yeah. I mean, what a beautiful vision, right? Like if we can just have conversations like this all the time to nourish us, like surely it's got to nourish a few other people too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, an embodied feminine leadership coach. Alice, there's so much about your story that I really, really love, but I want to start with just tell everybody what it is that you're doing, what is most alive for you right now, and what is turning you on about the work and the service that you do.
Sure. Well, first of all, I love to work with women. I love to work with all human beings. And I know that at the heart of the heart, there is such a thread of similarity between everything that every single human heart feels, desires, longs for in their life. And sisterhood really came to me in a huge way because, as many of us do on our path, it was such a place that I longed for really deeply. I remember being really young and just longing for depth of realness, the desire to be fully expressed as who I am. That wasn't always available to me with societal conditioning and the Asian upbringing and all of that. And I just longed for a place where I could really both go deep and fly high. I mean, maybe those weren't my words as a 3-year-old, but now I really recognize that's what I love to do, is share all layers of life with people. So as an embodied feminine leadership coach working in the field of pleasure and what it is to create a wealthy life, I do it with women because I know the pain of separation. Like when we don't have that connection to women who see us, celebrate us, who root each other on, to break that paradigm of competition, which I really, truly know is just a belief system, that we can dismantle in a moment like we did when we met each other for the first time. We looked at each other in the eyes, we felt each other and said what was actually bubbling up in our heart.
Yeah.
And there's so many different ways that simple moment could have gone from like, oh, who is she? Or I'm not.
What a weirdo.
Or not good enough, or separation, or whatever. Yeah. And instead you just said exactly what was on your heart. I said exactly what was on mine. And then that seeded this beautiful friendship. Yeah. So I really believe that in the world that we live in today, to bring in more of the feminine qualities of connection, of support, receptivity, creativity, manifestation, sensuality, sacred sexuality back into our conversations and in our lives and in our relationships is what the world needs to really come home to our hearts.
Okay. Actually, I'm sitting here realizing how juicy this conversation is, because I get to have a conversation with you that I haven't had yet before. Right. And I want to ask you, take me back to little Alice. This Alice that did have this sort of pain of separation from other women. Paint a little picture of that. Was that like a school thing? Was it a family at home thing? What was it that you were longing for, and where were the barriers? What was keeping you from having these in your life?
The image that I'm getting when you ask this question, Erica, is little Alice. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I was in the bathroom of my family home in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I grew up in the 80s. So I don't know if you had this in your bathroom, but I had one of those mirrors that was a medicine cabinet.
Totally. Okay.
And you would open it up and then you could see the back of your hair, right? I think that was kind of the point.
Multi perspective,
totally
angled mirrors. Yeah.
Yes. And if you angle it just right, you would see infinite numbers of yourself, of your own reflection.
Oh my gosh, yes. That's so true.
And I remember this moment where I looked in that mirror and I looked into my eyes and I wondered, who am I? And which of these Alices is real? And is any of them real? So this is one of my first imprints of this question of who am I and why am I here? And what is real and what isn't? So because I think I was so young and I had this kind of quest for soul purpose, if we want to call it that, these were the places that I wanted to go. And I was so inquisitive and curious, and I would ask all of these questions. And many times in my upbringing, it was like, you know, the conditioning that we probably all got, like go to school, do well, focus on what's going to make a difference in your life, and stop asking so many of these questions. It's not really going to matter. So I felt quite alone a lot of the time. The beauty and the gift of that is that I got to be really comfortable with being alone. So that has been the gift. But this quest for meaning and for depth of connection, for love to be seen and understood as who I am, has been a huge one. So I think I was really seeking for that my whole life.
And when you were young, did you remember attempting this with your friends and feeling like, oh, they don't get this?
Yeah. It was like, and even another memory I have was being in kindergarten. We were all on the reading carpet, you know, kind of like this. And we were all sharing. The teacher asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And every kid was like, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to be a teacher. And I remember like my heart starting to beat, you know, as it was coming around to me. I was like, I don't fucking know what I want to be. I'm 5. Like,
good for you. You should have said that.
I didn't. You know what I said though?
What did you say?
I said, I'm going to be a firefighter.
I swear to God, probably like 50% of kids probably think that at the time, you know, and they just blurt out something that they saw that day.
I literally think I just looked up and on the ABCDG chart, you know, was like the F, and I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to say. So I guess I share this right now, and why it's coming up for me is because I feel like I've always been quite unconventional and outside the box, and really trying to feel into like, wait a minute, like what is this world about? And who do I really want to be instead of who the world tells me to be?
So take me then, you know, there's Alice in Calgary, kind of feeling alone, but on this philosophical, personal quest. How did you have an outlet? Where was your first, where you're like, oh, I really started to really explore this at this junction?
I remember doing a lot of things in private. So, oh my gosh, if my parents ever see this episode, it's going to be an interesting one. But we're going to go there because that's what we do. I think I started to kind of create this life in secrecy, you know, because I know that for some people, when we get told these stories about how we should or shouldn't be, there's a few responses that can happen, right? One is that we completely shut down to who we are, which I've also had phases of that in my life for sure. Pretending that parts of me doesn't exist or make it insignificant or unimportant. And yet for me, I have such a fiery, independent, free spirit that's been with me that I often kind of rebelled, or I just had my secret life. So for example, my body was something that I was super curious about as a child. And I remember like discovering my vulva. You know, for the first time in my memory. And I was,
for those people, just in case people are like, what is a vulva?
Yes.
What is it?
They're your genitals. So the vulva is everything that you see on the outside of the female genitalia. The vagina is the inside.
Yeah. I think you were one of the first people to tell me this. And I was like, I have been using the word vagina wrong my whole life.
Yeah. I felt the same way when I first learned that. We don't often get taught that. Yeah.
So how young were you when you were like, I'm curious about my, like, what's your earliest memory of like exploring your vulva?
It was at daycare.
Oh, wow.
Sunny day. I'm guessing since I was in daycare, I was probably 4 years old or something. It's one of my first memories.
Wow.
And I remember being on my own, again, kind of on the periphery of where all the kids were playing. And I just wasn't interested in that sandbox, you know? So I just went over to the grass. And I wish I could do this right now, but I literally like squatted down and I took off my panties because I don't know why, because it felt good. And then I just swayed back and forth, like shifting my weight from one side to the other. And then I discovered the tickling of grass on my vulva with the sun shining on my body. And I remember just being so like entranced by this feeling like of grass tickling my body.
Knowing that this is the first memory that you had,
Yeah.
like, I'm like, of course you do what you do, Alice. Like it was written in the stars.
Now
already.
it makes sense, right?
Yeah, now it makes sense that you're a pleasure coach. Yeah, and that you teach people to live in their pleasure. Speak a little bit more into that, because I think when we say pleasure, when we speak about exploring our body, our vulva, you know, people can have all sorts of ideas about it. What does it mean to you to really explore that? What's the importance of it? And what is it exactly?
Yeah, great question. I just want to give a fuller picture to my experience because, of course, I have this little child who really was enthralled by the innocence of pleasure. And this is really what I support women to come back to, is the sacredness and also the innocence of our pleasure. You know, this is how young children and babies discover the world, is
through
touch, through sucking our thumbs, our toes, putting everything in our mouth. Like eye gazing, you know, the first eye gaze we have with somebody is as a baby. We smell everything, like we're curious through learning through our bodies.
Right.
So, and we learn very quickly what is pleasurable and what isn't. That's how we learn to navigate the world. So there's this innocence of pleasure that I feel is so important because as we grow up, and as little Alice grew up, I have also memories of being told, don't take
hump
off
the
couch.
And don't take off your panties in kindergarten. Yeah.
You just don't do that, or don't play with your Yoni. Your Yoni, it means sacred space. It's a Sanskrit word, which I just love. But don't do that. It's not safe. That's not what good girls do. You know, so many moments of having this messaging. All the way to when I was an adult and I had in my first marriage, we stopped having any sexual intimacy at all for the last few years, which was really, really a big challenge that has also led me to where I am, where I completely shut down my sexuality, my desires, my wishes, made myself so small, unexpressed. So I'm a pleasure coach now because I know what it's like to have that innocence of pleasure in life and also what it feels like to completely lose it.
Yeah. Let's dig into that. I can already, so what a beautiful, thank you for speaking into that innocence of pleasure. That's what we live for, right? When we say joy, and sometimes when we say, let's live more in our pleasure, what turns us on, we automatically sexualize it because we live in such a world that sexualizes everything. So that's, thank you for counter anchoring that into the innocence of childlike play. And then let's go into this. What does it feel like to be void of pleasure? What does it feel like to, and I know I have experienced this on different levels of maybe waking up on some days and just, we all go through those moments where we don't have any joy running through our bodies. We don't know what's motivating us. Like there's just something flat. But you went through a profound, I would say almost a spiritual journey. Like it was a journey that you came here to have in your last marriage. Can you paint that story and walk us through that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So back in 2009, I had a moment on my path that was profoundly life-changing. I was working in NGOs in East Africa, I was there for a year. I was pursuing something that I thought I loved, that my sociology degree, international development studies would lead to. I had this great internship that was highly competitive that I got. I had the man that looked great and I thought I would have a great relationship with, kind of these boxes were starting to be checked of what I thought I was told this whole time that would make me successful in my own way. But, it was checking off the boxes. And then I had this moment when I was in East Africa that I just felt like, I weighed about 20 pounds more than my normal weight. And I weigh 105 pounds. So that's a lot of extra weight on my frame. I was deeply unhappy. I was feeling heavy and weighted and wondering, how come I'm waking up like this every day? So I discovered yoga and met my yoga teacher trainer for the first time in Africa. One thing that I've been really proud of myself my whole life is taking risks and just following my heart, not knowing where it led to. So I met him and he just said, Alice, I'm offering my first yoga teacher training ever in Thailand. I would love for you to be there. And I was, an intern. I didn't have very much money at all at that time, but everything in me was like, yes, of course. So I went back to Calgary. I worked my ass off as a waitress for 3 months to save up as much money as I can. Went to Thailand, did the training, completely opened up my heart and my soul in the biggest way. And in that expanded place of joy, I met this man, Brett, who hired teachers at the Omega Institute in upstate New York, which is an incredible holistic place. He also somehow took a gamble on me and said, I want you there. Will you come? I said, okay. I went back to Calgary, worked my ass off for 3 months, saved up money, went to New York. And then there I met my first husband. And he was a really beautiful man, very on his spiritual path. And I think that was my biggest attraction to him, was he really met that girl that was staring in the mirror when I was young, looking at her own reflection and asking, who am I? So we went on a very beautiful love journey until a few years in, he completely lost his libido. He was working through a chronic illness, going through a depression, and just was not interested in having any sexual intimacy at all anymore. For the first few months, he didn't tell me that he had made this decision, that we just weren't going to have sex anymore.
And it was a decision.
It was a decision that he made without telling me. And so for those 3 months, I sat with so much rejection at night, wondering what was wrong with me, what had happened in our relationship. Was I not sexy enough, beautiful enough, smart enough, radiant enough, spiritual enough? It really hit on my core not enough wound. Until one day he really just said, I'm just not interested. And at that point in time, there was no space in our relationship for me to explore getting my needs anywhere else. In fact, it was even shamed that I had them at all.
Wow.
And at that point, I just was like, you know what? I'm going to turn over all the stones on this path. Like, let me see. Maybe it is just my ego that wants it. Maybe it is tension in my mind that craves it. And what happens if I practice celibacy like so many yogis and monks do? And maybe that's my path. So I walked that for a while, more than probably many people would, a few years.
How old were you?
I met him at 27 and we split around 34.
So this was probably the first half of your 30s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. And also that's often when women are having their sexual awakening, where we are able to explore our pleasure more. So what an interesting time for you to be going through this celibate phase.
Yeah. Huge.
Not by choice.
And not by choice.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, of course, it was my choice. I could have left. I could have created a different, path for myself. And in that moment, kind of feeling the choicelessness of it, either accept it or leave it. And I wasn't ready to leave it. So then I turned the reflection back and said, okay, let me look at myself. And like every quality, there's a light and a shadow. The light of that is I feel like I'm quite willing to look at myself and self-reflect in my life. The shadow of that was I just made myself small, made my needs insignificant. I prioritized somebody else first. And in that time, I just shrunk, and then I hid, and I hid it, and I hid it. So I guess bringing back to this little Alice who just then started to do things in secret.
Right.
You know, then I would self-pleasure in secrecy. I would still kind of give myself that pleasure, that sexual pleasure every once in a while. But at the same time, anytime we do something in silence, we create shame. Right? So shame exists in silence. When we feel that we have to hide, or we can't be ourselves, or if we were caught, then what? You know, so it was also layered with that.
Yeah, that reminds me of Brene Brown talking about the shame gremlins, and you just have to speak into them, and then it's almost like a light being shone on them, and then they sort of scatter and disappear. But in that secrecy, this feeling of feeling deeply ashamed just grows in your system, which is like the ultimate thing that starts to fester in your soul.
Yeah.
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 And so you're feeling this, you're kind of becoming, well, you're always Alice, but you seem to be having these two divergent lives.
Yeah.
And it comes to a head. How do you solve for this?
Yeah. I literally found myself one morning waking up, kind of peeking over the bed to see if he was still sleeping. You know, he was. So then I snuck over to our ensuite bathroom, and I closed the door. I locked it. I turned the tap on so that the sound of water would run so that he couldn't hear me. Wow. Self-pleasure. I laid a little towel on the floor. I laid down and I self-pleasured. And in that moment, something happened where when I brought myself to orgasm, I started to cry and cry and cry. And in that orgasmic opening, it flew right up into my heart and right up into my tears to cry for all of those times that I had denied this pleasure, because I realized that it wasn't just a fleeting pleasure. It was my life force. You know, that's what pleasure is. That's what the word eros means. It's life force. And life force also lives in our sexuality. That's what creates life. So I cried these tears for all the times that I made myself wrong, that I felt like I should be something that I'm not, to minimize myself. And in that orgasmic grief that happened, I believe now, looking back, that it made space, that death of that then made space for my aliveness to return again.
Yeah, and the word that keeps coming up for me is courage. Like you gave birth to courage in that moment to stand up for yourself, to step into your power, to own what is yours, to not be ashamed for being who you are, and to have life, and to want life, and to want all of the facets of it.
Yeah. Now, in that moment, I didn't know how I was going to do that.
Yeah, of course.
Right. It was really like this void space of, I don't know how I go from here to feeling alive again. I have no clue. But what I do know in this moment is that my current state of being is not the woman that I want to be 20 years from now, let alone 10, 5, 2, 1, 3 months from now. Right? So it wasn't that I was like, yes, now I'm like going to be this orgasmic tantra teacher that travels the world. Like I had no clue. I didn't even think that anybody would ever want to have sex with me again. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I really felt that.
In that moment. That was your reality.
Yes.
That you were being rejected by your own husband. So
yes.
How could anyone?
Exactly. Yeah. Not any of the billions of people on the planet You know, I mean, I can look at that and it's kind of hilarious now, but it was very real. So, you know, I work with so many women who feel this way, and to anybody who is listening right now who might feel that part of, am I desirable? Am I allowed to want what I want? I'm here to tell you that your pleasure matters. Mm-hmm. Because it is your life force.
Yeah. And you matter.
And you matter.
You matter. What you think, say, feel, want, desire, whether it's pleasurable or not, like whatever in your life, you matter. Every single person matters. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes we do, I think end up in life or in circumstances where the world makes us question, or the people around us might make us question if we matter. Yeah. Yeah. Or if does what I want count?
Am I allowed to have it? Is it too selfish?
Yeah.
Is it too superficial?
And it's so interesting because I'm sure everyone listening to your story would be like, of course you should. And in that moment, you really must have asked yourself this. Am I being selfish by asking this man who's just decided he doesn't want to have sex anymore, my husband, is it selfish of me to want something other?
Every day I ask this question.
You know, this is such a beautiful image you're painting of this history that you've gone through, because what I see, my first experience of you, one of my first experiences of you at a Tantra festival in Turkey was you holding a women's only temple, women's only circle, where we sat around and basically got to ask you anything and everything we wanted to ask about women's genitalia, the vulva, the different orgasms, everything about our pleasure. And you even showed us. You even at one point was like, would you mind, or would you asked for permission, said, I would be happy to show you the different parts of the yoni and explore this together as sisters. And it makes me flash back to you as a little girl, you know, looking in the mirror and asking these questions, but from this innocence. It was this innocent place of, let's learn together as women. Let's ask these questions we've all asked ourselves in our darkest corners. You know, some of us more openly than others, but it was such a beautiful moment. And I remember one of the women there saying, like, you took her breath away as you took off your underwear, and you were in this beautiful dress that you parted to the side and said, okay, everyone come close.
Yes.
And we were in this beautiful circle together, and she said, oh my God, you're so brave. And I remember in that moment going, oh, you are. And it was such an alchemical moment of giving all of us permission to look, to ask, to just be curious. And it wasn't with any judgment, or of course that you could feel a little bit of anxiety in the room of kind of like, oh, are we allowed? You know, but mostly this curiosity came in, this softness came in, and it just felt like women must be, you know, it just, to me, it felt like women have been doing this in red tents around the world for, you know, since the beginning of time. And it's only in this modern age that we've sort of lost touch with this ability to learn from each other as sisters and as mothers and grandmothers.
You know, one thing that I do my best to offer into the world is to bring the sacredness, the innocence, and the joy, the pleasure back to our bodies and our connection with it. Because this is the home, it's the dwelling place of our soul and in our incarnation this lifetime. And I, like most women, I probably had an ambivalent relationship with my body for many years of my life. So coming home to really realize that this is my temple, this is how I see my body as my temple, And if my body is my temple, then my yoni are the temple doors, you know, and the shape of the vulva actually are like the temple doors of the Balinese temples.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and then if we go into the vagina, into the canal, into the birth canal, you know, and then we meet the cervix. The cervix is an incredible gatekeeper to the womb, which is the place of creation and life, where spirit and matter meet. Like our bodies are absolutely incredible. So it's only the stories and the conditionings that we've been given that tell us otherwise. And when I started doing this work, I mean, I would blush. Like I couldn't say the word vagina without blushing or like, you know, like muffling. Like I couldn't do it. I couldn't. So to think that I would be sitting on a podcast with you right now speaking about these experiences is like unfathomable to Alice 10 years ago. So I just want to also share that if anybody's listening and it's just like, wow, that feels so far away from me. Like I get it.
I'm so glad you spoke into that because it is true, right? I have a whole gamut of friends, and some are, you know, on this side that just love to live here. And then I have really, really close friends that listen to some of my podcasts and they're like, I love it, and also it really makes me uncomfortable. And I just want to say, and I want to echo what you've said, that that's okay. And actually, just a reminder to everyone at home, if they're feeling a little uncomfortable, to just maybe open up to that with a little bit of innocent curiosity and just ask themselves, yeah, why do I feel uncomfortable with that? And just sit with it. There's nothing, you don't need to change it. If you want to turn off the podcast, you're more than welcome. Everyone's choice to be listening in on whatever conversation. But I love it when people tell me there's something that made them feel uncomfortable, because there's always gold behind that discomfort. Just sit with it for a moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this discomfort of being, what is it? It's like, yeah, I guess part of my mission in the world is really to bring this sacred innocence for all human beings and for women to come home to our bodies, because this is where we're living every day. It's our home.
Yeah.
You know, and I wish for every woman to know the power of our vulvas. It is incredible what we can create from here. So just going back to this memory in Turkey, I believe that we only make things weird or strange or uncomfortable if we were told that or if we decided it. But it's so many women come to my retreats and often even say like, oh, it took me a while to get here because like this just makes me so uncomfortable. But I swear, Erica, like 10 out of 10 women after they come will say, wow, I cried the whole time. I was in awe. Yeah. I was in joy. And I never, ever imagined that this could feel so natural.
Yeah. Yeah. You just saying that brings some tears to my eyes, because I have experienced that sometimes with you and other instances, but definitely the memory that comes to mind was a beautiful Tantra workshop you were running at Burning Man that I came to.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yes.
And it just came flooding back to me. We were meeting strangers at Burning Man, as you do, and we were asked to worship the temple. And there was, I was so lucky. There were some women there that got to be the temple, to be worshipped and to be seen by complete strangers. And there was an older gentleman and a younger one, and different levels of comfort in the situation, but just really with an innocence looking at me and going, like, just showering me with presence. And I remember I've been in that situation multiple times before, but it just brought me to tears. It's so powerful.
There's something so beautiful when we allow ourselves to be witnessed. Like you said, there's a healing that happens. It's like the Alice who thought that she needed to hide in the bathroom and turn on the faucet and lock the door in order to self-pleasure. You know, that shame that was placed as a rock in my backpack that I carried for so long, it frees up when we actually liberate it by giving it either a voice or a presence. It is beautiful to do this work on your own, and I highly encourage that. And for many women, that's definitely where you start, right? Is to actually gaze at your own vulva. Or if that feels like too much, I always encourage, like, this is how I wake up every day. This is my ritual, is I place one hand to my heart, the other hand over my vulva, like I'm giving her a hug, and I take 3 breaths. And it's really a simple hello. And this energetic breath connection of heart and vulva that says, yes, I exist. I see you. I presence you. I feel you. Thank you. You know, so that is the first practice that I give for people. And then from there, to be witnessed with these eyes of love. Like, so many women I know have never experienced that that feeling of, I get to just be here in the fullness of who I am, and there's somebody else here, but they don't want anything from me. I don't feel like I have to give anything or do anything to get love or attention, because that's what we learned as a child. We needed to get love and attention from our caregivers, and then our friends, and then our teachers, and then our partners, etc. We have been giving ourselves away in exchange for love our whole life. So when we presence for the first time of, I get to be who I am and be seen and witnessed as that and nothing else, so much healing happens in that moment.
So much healing, so much liberation. And I feel that that is such a portal to women really stepping into, I think, what most people call these days, like that high priestess path, this path where if you can be comfortable receiving that, then you can also give it without any need for reciprocity, but you just stand in your power and give everyone else permission to stand in their beauty and their power and their everything. And everyone just amplifies each other, which is the beauty of a really beautiful sisterhood and these women's circles or, you know, women's temples.
Yeah. I always encourage anybody that does work with me, like whether it's online or in person, that there's always so many options. I mean, I was a yoga teacher for a decade, you know, so I was always the teacher in class being like, option 1, option 2, option 3, like you could do this, you could try this, you can bind your arms, you can not. Right. So I really come from this place of, and my personality, just who I am, is like that. Like, because we've been given the idea that there's only like 1 or 2 stories of who we should be or how our relationship to our body, our pleasure should look like. And after some time, we realize, well, that's not the story that I want to write, or that doesn't feel quite aligned, but I don't know what other possibilities are there. That's normal. You know, we're social creatures that learn from watching each other and being in the presence of each other. This is how all creatures learn, all mammals learn. So being in these temple spaces with women is like this return to the most natural wildness of our being, which is to learn and witness each other. You know, so what I realize now that I didn't know then, and probably even in that moment where I actually shared and showed my vulva, is that this is how we start to dismantle this idea that there's anything wrong or shameful or to be hidden about a part of our body that gives life.
Yes.
So if one woman can do that, and if I'm that woman on that one day, and you are a woman for that on another day or in another topic, doesn't even matter. When we start to open up different doors of possibility to share and show and say, hey, yeah, I get that story doesn't fit you anymore. That belief system doesn't make sense in your body. You want more for yourself, more for your life. Guess what, sister? There is more. Let me open up this door. And Erica, let's open up that door. And Susan over there, let's open that door. And then every woman gets to have this new possibility. I call them portals of possibility. That's what we're doing all the time for each other, of what you could choose in your life. Right? So in any workshop that I do, it's always like, hey, guess what? You could try it this way. You don't have to share your vulva with everybody. Maybe your first step is to sit on the couch on your own and connect hands to vulva with all of your clothes on. Maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's to close your eyes and just be in the space. And then often women find themselves doing things that they never imagined that they would do because of this felt sense of safety. And actually, this is so natural that we're doing this. And not only so natural, it is extraordinarily beautiful.
100%. 100%. I also want to, I want to bring it back to the story of your mother-in-law joining.
Oh, right.
And also, I would love for you to give me and everyone like an idea of like the whole gamut of ages that come, and that people can find their pleasure, find their innocence, find their way back to their bodies at any age. And I feel like your story where you were in temple with your mother-in-law sort of encapsulates like a really beautiful, opening of multi-generational sort of learning and acceptance and openness. And maybe you could give us that transmission, because I'm not sure how many of us will have an opportunity to do that with our mothers or mother-in-laws.
Sure. I've worked with women ages 16 to 86. The majority of women that I work with are somewhere in their late 30s to late 60s. I have women of all ages come and say, I don't know if this is possible for me anymore. Maybe it's too late in my life. Maybe that part of my life has just gone, or, kind of dismissed their pleasure or made it smaller. And what I can share is that it is never too early nor never too late to connect to your body while you are still alive, because you are in it. Sharing this experience with my mother-in-law was extraordinary. Again, so many people probably would think like, oh my God, your mother-in-law? Like,
Yeah, well, the first time I was like, really? What was that like?
It was so natural.
Yeah.
Like we said, I mean, she has a very open mind and an open heart, and she, we have different layers of relationship together. She's also done other work with me before this session.
Just jump into the deep end.
Yeah. But it was so natural. And actually, one thing that I have also found is that, as a woman I'm in my 40s right now, sometimes I have my own stories around women's connection with their bodies at different ages or stages in their life. But what I've come to realize also with women who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s is, these women have given birth to children. They are caring for their grandchildren. They've been in this body for a long time. They are moving through the chapter of aging and what it feels like to transition in their beauty and in their radiance. There's a lot of different topics that are up. So it doesn't make it any less or more natural or strange or anything. We all have a body.
And so as soon as, I can imagine that if maybe she became actually a wisdom keeper that could actually disseminate wisdom to the other younger women in the room, being like, I've been through that, honey.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Or like women who've been through menopause.
Yeah.
Have a different experience. And this is, again, why I love to gather the women, because yes, I hold a lot of experience and wisdom and courage to be able to share on these topics, but I don't know everything at all. And I definitely don't know you and your body and the story that you want to write with it. The story that you've had and the story that you want to co-create with your body from now on. That's yours. Everybody gets to choose theirs. So when we come together as women, we also get to share from all of our different perspectives. First, to realize that any shame that you carry, you're not alone. I've worked with thousands of women around the world. I promise you, you are not alone.
Yeah.
At all.
I dare you to come up with a shame.
Yes, exactly. So that's the first thing, is to really liberate the shame.
Yeah.
And I love to take it further from there. It's one thing to kind of unpack what has happened, and it's an important part to give voice and to liberate that shame. And it doesn't stop there, because now the question is, now that we've given that space, like the moment that I cried all my tears on the bathroom floor, and it's like, okay, so now what's the story that you want to create with your body? And that's so much possibility. So with different women at different ages, including the 70s, including in their 80s, women have said to me, I've never experienced this kind of orgasm before. I've never had a cervical orgasm before. Or, wow, I thought that was over for me. Or one woman told me afterwards, she's like, Alice, I woke up last night so turned on. I couldn't sleep. And then she started to channel the creativity of this book that she wanted to write at 3 a.m. in her 70s.
I love this.
Because this part of her has unlocked.
Yeah. And again, bringing it back to often, unlocking your sexuality and that sacral chakra is unlocking your womb, unlocking creativity. This is where projects are born, not just children. Really touching in on I've had many guests on that are musicians and artists, and talking about how you really have to have that sex and throat open, your expression open, in order for creativity and artistry to move through you.
Yeah, for sure. The anatomy of your vulva, of your vagina, as well as your throat are very, very similar. They're both sphincters, and your anus. So the more that we start to release any of those one areas, they impact directly the other. There's a whole band of fascia, of connective tissue, that goes between your vulva and the throat. So absolutely, they are designed to work together.
Oh, I love it. So juicy. So I see this as, super clearly, like, of course, we all have little insecurities or things that we might be a little bit shameful about our bodies or about our sex. And then as we start releasing those, then it really falls into like accepting ourselves, being in this place of deep love. And then we get to a place where we get to like manifest, create, sex magic, all of these things, which I also had an experience with you and Burning Man at Layla Martin's Sex Magic Workshop, which was fabulous. We're just manifesting what we wanted in life. Tell me about this. I really feel when I speak to you, you're really exploring this topic of what is a wealthy life? What is a successful life? And then helping so many people find that themselves. But I really want to bring it to you. What is that for you now?
Great question. I feel like a lot of my life, I've just been trying to like unpack the stories I've been told to feel what is really alive for Alice and her soul, her incarnation on this planet. And a wealthy life for me is one that is rich, that has depth, that has play, that makes my whole body sit up taller, that vibrates, that is alive. And a wealthy life for me is not only financial wealth, that is a part of it. And that's actually another story that I've, come to actually embrace is, okay, I get to also be in financial abundance. I rejected that for a long time. So it's to welcome that, but it's also, what is the richness and depth of your connections and your friendships? How much is pleasure rooted in your daily life? And I don't mean just the fleeting pleasures. You get to have that too if you want. Have that cookie, have that chocolate, whatever, But for me, pleasure is really rooted in presence. So when we can really savor that breath, when we can open our eyes to the magic of the snow that is drifting out the window. My grandmother passed away 5 years ago, and I know both of our grandmothers have meant a lot to us in our life. And her dying process of, was one of the most devastating, exquisite, and pleasurable 3 months of my life, where there was nothing but presence being with her. And the pleasure of feeling my heart open, the pleasure of savoring every cuddle that I had with her in her hospice bed, the pleasure of bathing her and actually sponge bathing her yoni. I mean, that was a temple,
Yeah.
and honoring her tiny body at the end of her life. And knowing that she's given birth to 4 children and that these wrinkled hands have raised 9 grandchildren, it was the most sacred connection to Yoni, that I have ever experienced. That for me is a wealthy life, to be able to take the time to cherish those last months with my grandmother.
Yeah, I so resonate with that. It's, I really felt that last year when my grandmother passed at 102. We've had a few conversations around it, and how lucky that, I was able to get on a plane because intuition called me in her last week. I didn't know she was dying, and that was the last time I was going to see her. And literally I came back, and then 6 hours after I landed back in Dubai, I got a call saying that she had passed. And to me, what luxury that I had, to wealth for me in that moment was also to have the material success or financial wealth that I could get back on a plane and take another 13-hour plane or 10-hour plane to Japan and go to that funeral and honor her body and be entirely present with my family, with her, with all of the community coming together in prayer, and then watching that body be cremated to dust. It's those moments that, it's so interesting. I would never relate pleasure to it, but I would relate the word sacred. And you're right. When I am in my sacred, spiritual place of deep stillness, that is my ultimate pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. When you told me about those last moments of really honoring your the body of your grandmother, I felt like right there with you. This ritual, like you said, is so important, of really honoring the bones of our ancestors.
Yeah. To watch it burn and then be brought to dust, and then to take these big wooden chopsticks and actually pick whatever big parts of her bones were left. And when we saw this one screw that was actually in her hip.
Wow.
Since her operation at 80, so it had been in her body for 22 years. And they asked if we wanted it to be part of the urine, to when we were putting everything in there. And then we said, no, we think, the screws can leave, but we'll take the bones. And
wow.
But it was a magical alchemical moment, the power of fire, to really release a body and to say goodbye to her on this material plane.
Yeah.
and then invite her into my spiritual world where, I get to have conversations with her all the time now.
Super beautiful. Can I share one part about this pleasure, pain, death?
Yes.
Before I really came into deep relationship with pleasure and what that means and feels like for me, I kind of scoffed it. I felt like pleasure is just superficial, or it's not a worthy pursuit. Or again, it's just a bit selfish, and who really cares? It's not deep enough. And I really recognize now that for me, pleasure is pure presence and the full acceptance of everything that life is. So when my grandmother passed, I committed 11 days to being on my own in this tiny little cabin in the middle of the foothills of Alberta. And I just said, okay, I'm going to give myself this time to really deeply grieve and be with everything that is. My grandmother's death completely shook me to the core. I mean, there were months, like a good year, where I really questioned my desire to be here in this body and in this life. I was like, wow, she got to go. Like, please, life, like, take me. Thank you, and take me. So I was in a lot of also deep pain of still being here, even though I'm very grateful for my life, and yet I do have this part that exists in me that's like, but why? Why bother? So after she left, I went into a deep grieving process and quite a depression. But as I was grieving her, I remember one day doing a ritual, and I was singing mantras, and I was praying to the altar of life. And my heart just shattered open so deeply. The pain was so deep. It felt like it really just pierced through my heart. And the pain just shattered my heart and into like millions of pieces on the ground, just like if you broke a piece of glass and it shattered, And I felt that shatter of my heart and looking at these energetic pieces on the ground and feeling like, wow, I will never be able to put all those pieces back together. Impossible. And in that moment of understanding, or not just understanding with my mind, but really feeling the power of my heart shattered open into a million pieces from the depths of this pain, but with its root in love. And that I can never put my heart back together the same way that it was before ever. It will forever be open. That pain turned into pure pleasure. It didn't make it any less painful or sad, or I still miss my grandma. But it transmuted it into the pleasure of being human, which is not absent of pain.
100%. Yeah. I feel you, sister.
Yeah.
With that, although we could do this for hours.
Yes.
Alice, I really want to thank you for being here. We will post on enlighteneddxb.com and on all of the places where people will get this podcast how to reach you. But what's the easiest way to reach you?
Yeah, Instagram, Alice Hong Official. I love to offer women's retreats around the world. I do one-on-one coaching. I have an online community. So just shoot me a DM, Alice Hong Official. You can find me there.
Awesome. And for those of you who are here in Dubai in this community, we are starting to seed and cook up having Alice here more often. Yeah. So really excited to bring that to you. And in due time, just sign up for the newsletter at enlighteneddxb.com and we'll keep you posted. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so
Alice.
much, Erica. I love you.
Love you too.
Hey there. If you like this episode and you're getting some beautiful transmissions or are feeling inspired to support this podcast in any way, the best way to do that is to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on YouTube, or wherever it is that you're plugging into the Enlightened DXB podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at EnlightenedDXB. If you want to reach out to any of the guests we have on the show, you can check out their profiles and their work at www.enlighteneddxb.com. And for those of you in Dubai looking for community, retreats, or additional resources, You can also sign up to our emailing list there. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Until then, I wish you more joy, more ease, and a little sprinkle of grace.